welcome back to a new episode of the Reading Room Ruffians, your favorite library podcast. We're back. It's been kind of a minute. We're sorry a little bit, but we've also been crazy. We're not gonna, I didn't write an opener today. So we're just gonna cold open to, we're discussing my nonfiction pick, which is Love and Whiskey by Fawn Weaver. I'm actually really pumped about this book. It was so good. It is about Jack Daniels and Nearest Green, who was his first master distiller. I am joined by Ariel, Carla, and Zach.
Hello,
Zach
hello.
better have waved.
He had to think about it. Okay, so let's get into it, I guess. I didn't bring the book out here.
I had a preview of this already.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
had lunch and she told me about it.
It
It was really good.
I absolutely love this book. So before we get started, I just want to let everybody know this is a Black history book, and it does talk about slavery. So if this is not something that you are fond of, or if it makes you uncomfortable and therefore you don't like it, this book is probably not going to be for you. But in my opinion, we should talk about this stuff. Black history is American history. And so this book, it has like 5 different chronological orders. But I'm going to go, I'm kind of just going to talk about the origins of alcohol. And then we're going to do Jack Daniel and Nearest Green. And then we're going to do some of Lynchburg. And that should be about where we settle today. So first of all, I didn't know this until I read this book. Alcohol and slavery were best buds. And alcohol was used to make slaves docile, both whenever they were first captured in Africa and also on the ship ride over. So alcohol doesn't expire. So they would just ship bunches of slaves and alcohol at the same time, and whoever made it. But I also didn't know that distilling, and I believe specifically distilling is distinctly African, which I thought was pretty cool. And Europeans brewed alcohol, so both of these ways of alcohol making are obviously different. And whenever Europeans started coming to Africa for the slave trade, that was whenever they learned about distilling, and obviously the Africans learned about brewing. So it was kind of, I didn't know that, which is really cool. So yeah, that is like the biggest oof. Well, anyway, because I mean, we like alcohol, but also, dang. So that was my little bet you didn't know that from history. That's pretty cool. If you did know this, like, I commend you. That is probably it's a cool tidbit, but it's also not, because I mean, dang, that sucks. But
Did you say, okay,
anyway.
So you said that normal brewing and stuff came from like Europe. And then distilling came from
Africa.
How did they distill things? Are you going to talk
so
about that
they
later?
used
Because that seems complicated. Because you need lots of metal usually for distilling.
Well, no, there's actually 5 or 6. Well, that's actually I can't recollect the actual number, but there's a bunch of different ways that they have documented. So they used sand, gravel. They have also been known to use charcoal, which is specifically what Jack Daniels does. And so that is how this comes into play with Nearest Green. But yeah, there are quite a few different ways that people have done distilling over the years. Well, I guess centuries. So Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. And it is
That's
kind
wild.
of regional what they use depending on where they were in Africa there. So it's kind of just like a use what you got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Really cool. Yeah. And I will say she goes into a lot of detail about all of these things. In her research, she did such amazing research. And she did not have a whole lot to go on because black people and their history and, everything that they did was not well documented either on purpose or, it wasn't kept track of, it was lost, it was ruined, any which way you dice it. It's really not easy to find a lot of stuff for Black people especially whenever they go to do genealogy, misspelling, like name misspellings. You'll see different names for the same people, and you don't really know that unless you know. And one of the biggest reasons that Nearest Green's family knows his story and it stayed within their family is specifically just orally. She found, I think, like 4 pieces of actual documentation of Nearest Green. He was not like anywhere else under, he was named, his name is specifically Nathan, but his family called him Nearest. I don't know why, but that also is not documented, but like that's what he went by.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she found like one record of him on the land with Jack Daniel. Him and Jack Daniel shared a farm, which didn't know that. That's really cool. And then there was another of his wife, him and his wife, whenever they moved out of Lynchburg and bought property elsewhere. And then, I don't know, there were like 2 or 3 others that were just very obscure, but they had his name on them. And so that was like, I found something. But the rest of the time she spent speaking with his family and family friends. And I think that is so cool. It is a very big testament to how important it is to not only document on paper, but to share stories about each other and your family to carry it on. Because, if something were to happen to the digital age, everything digital is lost. If we have stuff on paper and, fires happen, that's lost. And all you have left is just what somebody knows. And if you aren't talking about that and sharing that, it's just gone. And that is what happened to most of Black families in America. So anyway, all right, we're going to move on to Jack Daniel. Jack Daniel, whenever he was, I don't know, like a teenager, he started working for Daniel Call. This is going to be kind of confusing because it's Jack Daniel and Daniel Call. They ended up
confusing.
Yeah. They ended up opening, okay, so Daniel Call owned a distillery, a whiskey distillery. He also owned a little grocery store, and also, what was the third thing? I was like a convenience store, I guess, like grocery convenience store, whatever. And Jack Daniel started working for him at the grocery store, and he had the distillery out behind, like in the back of his shop. And Daniel Call was a preacher. I think it is important to the story, but anyway. And the story from Jack Daniel for the longest time was that Daniel taught Jack how to distill the whiskey, the way that they make it. And like, they haven't changed the recipe, like really at all. But in all actuality, Nearest Green was the one who showed Daniel and Jack how to distill whiskey the way that they do. So they opened up this distillery. They ended up, once Jack got older, they opened the Daniel and Call distillery. And which is funny because Daniel Call, I just can't, yeah.
That was definitely his idea. He's like, I would just want my name both of it, you know?
Yeah.
Just gonna make my name, but really it's your name though, because your last name.
Yeah. Basically, yeah. Maybe it was Dan and Call. I don't know. Anyway, whatever. Anyway. So they opened that distillery, and Nearest Green was a master. Well, for this, he was not the master distiller, but he was a distiller there at their distillery, and they did have they had more. They had like a really good mix of Black people and white people working at this distillery. Like, this was not a super segregated town. I'll go more into that later, but so yeah, they worked together for a long time, and eventually Mr. Daniel Call decided that this was about whenever the temperance movement started, sometime in like the 1850s or 60s or something like that. And he no longer, it was kind of looked down upon at this point for a pastor to be dealing in spirits. So he sold his shares of the Dan and Call distillery to Jack, and then it became Jack Daniels. And he then made... Go ahead.
I don't know that makes sense, because last time I checked, priests were all about the Holy Spirit, and that's a spirit, so you would think...
I think that's just Catholics. Okay. Just Catholics.
Just saying.
Yeah. That's what are you gonna do? We wouldn't have Jack Daniels if he didn't feel that way. So, in my opinion, good riddance.
Just call something. It's all good.
So yeah, then Jack Daniel made Nearest his master distiller, and this actually made Nearest Green the first official master distiller, the first Black master distiller in America, which is super cool. Especially because this wasn't really known about. Like, Lynchburg, Tennessee knew about it, and that's pretty much it. But, like Jack Daniels, the brand did not really share a whole lot of that, especially the further removed they got from Jack Daniels' family.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it was like on purpose. It was just like phased out because those people weren't from Lynchburg. And as Fawn found out whenever she first started researching, if you did not make yourself part of them, they did not share with you. And it was very cool. So a little bit more about Jack Daniel, because I love this man, all right? I love Jack Daniel's whiskey, but I did not know how much I love this man until I read this book, okay? He never owned a slave. His dad did, but he did not. And he also surrounded himself with Black people. It was like an all take it or leave it. Like, I'm not getting rid of them. They're not leaving. So get over it or don't. And everybody got over it. Like, legitimately. A lot of the people in Lynchburg, Tennessee will tell you that Jack Daniel was the main reason that racism was not nearly as an issue as it was anywhere else, especially around them. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
He also, whenever he hired Black people to work at his distillery, he paid them higher than any of the white people working in his distillery. So they would be hired at $2, whereas I believe most white people would be hired, I think, at like $1.50 or $1.25, something like that.
Wow, that's quite a difference.
Yes, yeah. And the Daniel family and the Green family remained super, super close for multiple generations, which I think is absolutely, like, goosebumps. It really is just so cool. This is like kind of a tangent about Jack Daniels, but she was looking into a lot of this. Whenever she first heard about Nearest Green and Jack Daniels, she did not believe for a second that Jack Daniel ever hid Nearest Green, just because he was in any pictures that Nearest was in. Specifically, there's one that the book is based around, the one that made her look into this to begin with. Nearest is front and center of the picture. And for the time, like Jack Daniels is just to his right, which is like the center of a picture was very prominent. Like prominent people were in the center of photos. And he didn't look disheveled. He didn't look downtrodden. He didn't look ill-kempt, anything. And I just don't believe for 1 second that this is really how the story goes. So she like basically dropped everything in California and all but moved to Lynchburg, Tennessee with her husband. And
I was thinking about what you told me about that.
Tangent. We'll come back to that, but yeah. It is so cool, and she is a very thorough. She's written multiple books. This is her I think first biography, because the other two are like living as a Christian woman books, kind of like.
Yeah.
And she is like deeply rooted in her faith. But actually, I didn't feel icked by any of it. It was super cool, and she is very pro serendipity. Like a lot of this story, she's like, I think God had something to do with it, but I think, serendipity also. And that's pretty cool. So, anyway, we've got, who else have we got? Oh, right. Okay. So back to Lynchburg and surrounding areas, they had a Mason group, the Freemason group. And in her research, she found that every single one of the whiskey distillers in the surrounding area were part of the Freemasons, except for Jack Daniel. And she believes that it is because he is the only one of the whiskey distillers who did not own slaves. And so he was like, I'm not going to be part of you guys. So whatever. And Daniel Call was a Freemason. So, whatever. But I thought it's very, he very much was loud about who he was and how he did not accept what the norm of the time was.
Yeah.
I just absolutely, I can't get over that. I love it. We love Jack Daniel. Love it. So Nearest Green, actually, we've talked about it, not a lot has been documented about Nearest Green, where he came from. It's actually speculated that he was either a freed slave of Jack's father or Daniel Call. But that's just speculation. They don't actually know for sure. There is no paperwork saying anything about how he first showed up in Lynchburg, nor is there really anything about his death. We don't actually know when he died. And I'm trying to keep all my stuff together here. So he had a very big family. I actually cannot really. It's a crazy family tree, okay? And actually some Greens and Daniels married. So there are all over the place, Daniels and Greens and Lynchburgs, and they do go back together. I think is really cool. And besties, we have besties going back 4 or 5 generations. And we also have his wife. I think he and his wife had 6 or 7 kids, I think.
Dang.
But they didn't, yeah. But they, let me see, Jesse and, oh no, I forget the other brother's name. They passed away fairly early. And his oldest son, then George, began working in the distillery, and really from there, brothers, nephews, nieces, on down the line began working at the distillery too. And in fact, today there are still 3 of Nearest Green's descendants that work in the distillery. It's very cool. I love that. And so Nearest was able to do really well for his family. And most of his kids were able to do pretty great things with their own lives. His son, George, as I stated, worked in the distillery, and he became a very prominent person in Lynchburg. He was responsible for sending kids to college, setting up college funds, and he was also he would hand out loans for people who, especially during the Depression, and he would ensure that people did not go without as much as he could. And that is, especially for that time, that is insane. And we love to hear it. So that is like a very brief and quick overview of the key players here. So do we have any questions before I continue forward? Okay. All right, cool. The last part I'm going to talk about here is like Lynchburg itself. And I didn't know this, and I know that like it happened all over the country, I'm sure, but in Lynchburg, Tennessee specifically, it was a bubble of anti-racism. The white people and the black people, they lived together. Like they played together. The kids played, and like there were segregated schools. And whenever that all started, they built the segregated schools. But whenever they reintegrated, it wasn't a problem. And that was like Fawn had interviewed one of Nearest's relatives who was a teacher during desegregation. And she was like, what was it like going from a black-only school to teaching white kids too? And she was like, it was a non-issue. And she just goes, huh? You sure? And I also said that. I was like, okay, are we just saying that? And she's like, no, like we all played together already. We ate together. We laughed and cried together. Like we did everything together. It was never an issue for us. And it was just like, that's insane. Yeah. And she kept running into that. The more she did research and the more she asked anybody in the town, it was like, we had segregation, but we didn't really do anything about it. Like it, there was like an ice cream shop, and blacks could only enter through the back. And at one point, Nearest Green's, I think it was George, as a child, walked in through the front door and sat down. And somebody was like, you have to go in through the back. And somebody else was like, do you know who that is? and that girl, I believe it was a waitress. She was not like from the town, but yeah, they were. She found out, and she was like, oh, okay, well, just kidding. But yeah, like they would all come in through the back door and sit down together. There wasn't like segregated sides or seating or anything like that. It was just like, okay, like. And, nobody, like, forced them to do it either. It was just, like, we all learned from our parents. Like, our parents said, go through the back door. Like, it's fine. It was never anything like, you have to do this. Or, like, you'll get in trouble if you don't. It was just, like, do this. And that was that. And there have been, at one point, she was doing, like, town halls with a lot of the older generations while she was researching. And she asked them, do any of you recall ever seeing or interacting with the KKK? Like this whole room of like 50, maybe more people, all were like, no. But she saw one man who was shaking his head, and she goes, well, all right, so tell me your experience. And he goes, one time I saw one KKK guy, and he was asking for change, and I laughed him out of town. I was like, you know what? I love that energy. Like, I love it so much.
Well, that's what you should be doing, honestly.
Yeah. Asking for donations for the KKK. He just laughed him out of town. I was like, and he goes, oh, we never saw anybody else again.
I think it's kind of ironic to the name of the town.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I've been wondering that too. I was
Yeah,
just
that
like,
relates back.
it's a little.
Yes, yeah,
Well,
that
much.
brings us back to the.
Is it named
thing I
after
was mentioning.
somebody? Is that the reason it's called
I
that? Or
actually don't know. She
like,
doesn't
is this
actually
David
talk about
Lynch's
it.
town, Lynchburg?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't think to look that up. And she didn't actually talk about it. Like it was
That's
just
wild.
I'll
yeah.
do
So like
research.
whenever she first learned about this, she she wanted to go really bad. And so for reference, Fawn and her husband are both black, okay? Like they are black. And she is a very well-to-do businesswoman. Like when you talk about type A, like she is type A. Like she wow, cannot even. But she said, I want to go and I want to research this. I want to bring this story to life. Like this story needs to be done right. And he said, no, I'm not going anywhere named Lynch, like with Lynch in the name. And I laughed so hard. And she was like, I mean, I get that, but I want to go to Lynchburg. And so, you know, like her birthday came up or, you know, anniversary or anything, like any vacations. She was like, oh, I want to go to Lynchburg. And he was like, what about Paris? She's like, what about Lynchburg? Just kept going until finally he was like, okay, well, let's go to Singapore because you said you really, that's on your bucket list. And she goes, okay, we can go to Singapore by way of Lynchburg. And he said, fine, I'll give you 4 days there. That's all you get. And so, yeah, that started it all. I just
4
think
days
that
is
was
pretty good.
so funny. Yeah. She didn't find very much that 4 days because she was an outsider and she was, she did ask good and right questions. But it took her a long time to be able to really suss everything out from everybody. And
Because she's an outsider.
yes,
She's, you know,
yeah.
Southern people are very clannish.
Very.
We are very
and
clannish.
especially, I mean, this town especially. Like, there was like, I don't know, like at the time, like 430 people in Lynchburg.
And they,
like,
they protect their
yes,
own.
yeah. And a lot of them were Greens and Daniels. Yeah. So it's just like, you know, it makes a lot of sense, but it's also just so cool. It also... It was also in a bubble in the sense that whenever the Great Depression happened, the collapse, the Farmers Bank, the man who ran the Farmers Bank, he knew it was going to happen. Like he was like, it was overdue. It should have already happened. He was like, so over, you know, like the 6 or 10 months or, you know, I don't know, like a year maybe before, he had sold off as many of the bank's assets as he could and stored that cash. And so whenever it happened, everybody came to the bank like, I want all of my money. And he was able to shell out, you know, thousands of dollars. And, you know, the first, I think like 3 or 4 people got their money out. And then like they would talk to the next people. And then all of those people left. So they turned around and were like, okay, if you have our money, like just as long as you have it, we can keep it in the bank. And that is insane. Like, because I don't know how many other places that happened in America, but in Lynchburg, Tennessee, like, what are the odds?
There's some geniuses down there.
Yeah.
So crazy stuff. John Lynch is the founder of, well, he made this ferry service back in the day over the Fluvanna River, and which is now called the James River. Anyway, and eventually that built up a little town. It was called Lynchburg. Okay. The funny thing is, his brother, whose name is I just read it. Hold on a second. I mean, it's another Lynch, but 1 second. Oh my God, I just lost it. Anyway, I'll find it here in a second. But anyway, he was a judge, right? Who was prosecuting British soldiers in the Revolutionary War without due process. So eventually lynching meant prosecuting people without due process. His name was Charles Lynch. There we go. They were called lynch laws. And that eventually became lynching, which was the meaning that we know today, which is this extrajudicial targeting and killing of black people. So it's literally the same origin. And the crazy thing is, John Lynch freed all his slaves before he died. He was an abolitionist.
Yeah.
It's just
right. Yes.
buck wild.
Lynchburg was also home to one of the earliest and I guess loudest anti-slavery publications. So this guy, I don't have access to his name, but it's like an Aaron, I believe, but it's spelled like EHRIN, I believe, is something weird like that. He would publish it. He was a staunch abolitionist, and he would send out the publications to any local politicians. And eventually the governor at the time wrote him back and asked him to stop because he was, quote, ruining the community, I don't know, like community, like the happiness. Like, you're causing a problem. You're making people uncomfortable. Oh, how far we've fallen. Anyway, but yeah, this is just such a cool town. Like, so many abolitionists, anti-racists. Like, it's crazy. There were some dark times. And I actually 1000% am not sure if this is a neighboring town that is very close. I think it's like Shelbyville. There might be another one that these may have happened in, but I believe they were in Lynchburg. At one point, there was a lynching. The KKK came from out of town, and they did break into a family's house, and they did kill the father and the mother and 2 babies.
Oh my God.
Yes. And but the town retaliated so hard. It was like, don't you ever come back in here. And that was, I believe, I'm not sure about the timing. So, but the town went together to make sure that, the rest of the family was taken care of and everything was handled correctly. And then at another point in time, Lynchburg had volunteered to hold a not convicted, someone who had been arrested, a black man who had been arrested for, quote unquote, raping a woman, even though the white woman could not identify whether her perpetrator was black or white. I screamed at my car. I said, he was white. Don't even. I already know. Anyway.
I don't know.
So yeah. So, he was arrested and,
That's buck wild.
and obviously this was at a really bad time. So, I believe it was, the sheriff or, state police or maybe even the feds at that point, were worried about keeping him anywhere, that had a strong presence of the KKK. And so the mayor of Lynchburg said, hey, we'll take care of him. Like, it's okay. Like, we want him to have his due process. Like, he deserves that. Everybody deserves that. And so they did. They housed him. And again, the KKK came from outside of town and they stormed the building. And, they weren't expecting anything like this. So, like, they did have some guards, but it wasn't like, they didn't have anybody locked and loaded. It was just like, is Lynchburg, like, what happens here? And the sheriff had been there and he raised the alarm. And the town first came running because they were under the impression that, like, a fire or something was happening. But then they saw that, these men were shooting and they knew exactly what was happening at that point. So a lot of them turned around and went to get their own guns. And they fought until, like, with everything they could, all of their ammo, until they had nothing left. They did end up killing and hanging that man. But it was not without a fight from the citizens of Lynchburg. And this is like both black and white citizens, and so we all are clear. Yes, like they all fought for this man who wasn't even from their town. That was just such a cool story. Like, it sucks, but I mean, I'd never heard of anything like that.
I mean, it's a true testament to the people of that town.
Yeah, seriously. They took that seriously. Wow.
Yeah. And so like, I guess just the last thing that I'm going to say, I'm going to reiterate it again. Jack Daniel was very responsible for how anti-racist a lot of this town was. And, you know, like he wasn't the only one, obviously, but it was stated multiple times by multiple people, multiple instances that, you know, if you came to Lynchburg to stay, you either got over the racism or you got out. And they made sure that it was like that. And they kept it that way. And that is how it should be. But there we are.
That's the mentality America should take.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
For realistic,
Be good
about
or
a
get
lot
out.
of things, you know?
Yep. A lot of things. But yeah, all right. That's like those are my big highlights. I will end up, I guess, Fawn ended up opening a whiskey distillery of her own under it's Uncle Nearest whiskey distillery. And
Nearest is just such a goofy name. Would you say his name actually was Nathan?
Yeah, Nathan, yes.
Obviously.
Yeah.
I wonder if they just were going to call him Dearest and they just went with Nearest because his name started with an N.
You know what? Maybe.
Yeah.
That's a good thought there.
I've been thinking about that for way too long.
It's like, how is this going to work? I don't understand it.
I went with the other one. There's a bunch of kids, and the mom was like, you're the nearest. Come here.
Oh my gosh.
That is so funny.
Mine's sweeter.
Yeah, it's sweeter.
Yeah.
It's much sweeter.
But yeah, that was but she had to fight tooth and nail. It wasn't because Jack Daniel, the brand itself, was actively against her. It was just specifically some people within the brand who did not want her to do well because they didn't want to see that she did not want to harm Jack Daniel, his memory, or anything, because in fact she cherished him because of how he treated Nearest. And like, I mean, she wasn't a part of the family or anything, but it's like she wanted his legacy to live, and to do that, Jack Daniel's legacy also needs to live because they were super close. You can't have one without the other. And it was just very hard for her to make everybody see that. Like a lot of the important people, like I think is like the VP of the the management company for Jack Daniel. Whatever that word is, he was absolutely on board with her the whole way. And he did everything that she asked. He went out of his way to reach out to Nearest's family and ask for their input. And he, like, from then on, he didn't know that he had 3 of Nearest's relations working in the distillery. He was like, why don't I know that? That is the coolest thing ever. And so, like, he started meeting with them regularly, and it's a really cool thing. And she started this distillery specifically because going through all of this research for Nearest and his family, like, Nearest's closest family was able to do fairly well for themselves, but past that, they didn't really get that opportunity. And so a lot of them, didn't get to go to college, or they did, but then they had to drop out. And she said, I want to sell Nearest whiskey, and I want those proceeds to put his family through college. And this is not just 4 years of college. This is like up to a doctorate degree should they choose.
Wow.
Yes. And this is like, yeah, it's super cool. And, I now want to drink all of the whiskey. I did before anyway, but now it's even more. No. So yeah, that's the story of Jack Daniel and Nearest Green.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. There was a lot more in here. Obviously, she did a very thorough job, and it was super cool. She did a lot more history about Lynchburg and some of the surrounding towns. And she did as she told as much as she could about Nearest and all of his family. She made sure to speak with all of them, on their own as much as she could, and it was fantastic. Fantastic.
That's cool. I've got I like the nonfictions better than some of the fictions. I mean, I have a fiction right now I'm listening to that I'm pretty fond of, but I like these. I like these stories.
Yeah, I do too.
They can be pretty good as long as you get like a good story, obviously. But
and I think it also helps that I don't know. I think you could tell that she was very passionate about it, but she went out of her way to make sure that she told it, and it wasn't like glorifying anything. It was really just, like as I'm finding out, like, yes, I'm gonna share my surprise with you as an author, but also like this really happened, and we should know that more of this stuff happened, and we should know, all of it, like all of the bad, all of the good. Like we do need to talk about it, and it is something I fully agree. So I
think we need to hear more of the good because we do hear a lot of bad, and it's nice to hear. Yeah,
especially
there was good. Yeah, and there was probably a lot more good than we realized.
Yeah, I just thought that was so cool about Lynchburg. Like multiple ways, this town was a bubble. Insane.
Hey, can you remind me what time period this was again? I don't remember.
Okay, so like 1860s.
Okay, I thought so. I thought it was like mid 1800s. That's wild.
Yeah. Yep.
Trying to pop it back.
Oh,
that's hurt.
All right. Well, I mean, do we have any final thoughts or anything like that?
Drink
whiskey.
whiskey.
Actually sounds like a pretty good book. Yeah, drink some whiskey. There you go.
Jack Daniels.
Maybe some Jack Daniels.
Nailed it.
What's your favorite Jack Daniels? Do you have one?
I just love Jack Daniels.
Oh, I'm not much of a Jack drinker.
I don't think I've ever tried it.
I just like whiskey.
I've had it in Jack and Coke. I usually go for bourbon, so in general, I like bourbons.
Yeah, I just like whiskey.
I don't think I've ever had one in like a Jack Daniels in an old fashioned. I think that might be okay.
I might go buy some now. Like on the way home. I don't know.
You know my favorite.
Just wait until you get home until you open it.
My favorite whiskey drink. My favorite whiskey drink. Everybody's gonna be like, "Oh my god, what?" But I get this. My big brother is 100% organic grape juice and whiskey. It is so good. Yeah, I don't know
that I believe you. That sounds
it
weird.
is so good. If you like grape juice, you'll like it. Okay, that's all I'm gonna say. I
like
love grape juice.
But...
Like I love grape juice, real grape juice. And yeah, it started out as like a Christmas thing. My brother was like, "Oh, here is my Christmas drink," and I was like, "You're so weird." And then I tried it, and I was like, "You're onto something."
No, then you're like, "I'm so weird."
Yeah, I mean, I am weird. I
hate grape juice.
I love it. I do like it with Sprite though too.
I like grape juice that's become alcoholic.
Yeah, but
this is just wine now. You've just made wine in a weird way.
That's what I'm talking
about. What's it called?
Weird wine.
Fortified wine. Fortified? I think
funny.
That's what it's called. You basically made a weird port.
Yeah. I mean, basically.
Yeah, I don't like port.
It is. I don't know. Yeah, but I also like it with Sprite. Sprite is good too. Sprite and peach schnapps and some whiskey. That's a good one too.
That's interesting. Never had either of those. I just have, if I ever drink Jack and Coke, that's it. Or I do an old fashioned a lot of the time.
That's just too fancy for me. I'm sorry. I can't.
It's because he's pretentious.
Yeah. Well,
you should have had Angela.
How is it old fashioned
whiskey?
pretentious? Oh, when she came up and I made her try all the whiskeys.
Oh my god! I thought she was going to die.
That was hilarious. It was Irish whiskey. We were drinking it straight because it was like a tasting thing. There were 4, I think, or 3. Anyway,
There was 4. There was 4.
There were
because
4.
She only tasted 3.
Yeah. The last
She couldn't
2
do
were
that
really
last
good, I
one.
remember.
The first one was bad.
I don't know if I would call it bad. It wasn't
It was
as good
more
as
like
the other
paint
ones.
thinner.
It wasn't as smooth as the other ones. The other ones were
Paint thinner.
smooth. Like a
But
baby's
the-
You
It
bottom.
was
also
drow.
couldn't handle whatever it was that we drank at Christmas. What was
This
it that
is
you
true.
got?
The
for the
wassail.
Me? Oh, it was bourbon, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't bourbon.
Oh,
brandy?
no. What was that? It
I
was
think it was brandy.
Yeah, I didn't like it. It was paint thinner too.
It was not.
I mean, it
too
wasn't
cheap. It was
particularly
too
good
cheap.
brandy, but
It was not. It was just really cheap because I didn't know what
It was
kind to
not
get.
paint
Yeah.
thinner though. Like me and Zach tried it, and she was like, "Oh," and we were
But
like,
man, I
"It's
love
not
the
bad."
wassail. I did like the wassail.
We told her to put the whole, like half the bottle in there, and she wouldn't do it.
yeah.
So we had
It was
Dr.
low
Pepper
proof
come.
too. It wasn't even that high. So
That
I
is
don't
so
know.
funny.
The wassail was good though.
The wassail was good with the bugs.
That would
Yeah.
be cloves.
they had
I
bugs
put
in it.
cloves
I
in it,
saw
and they were like,
floating
"Oh
in
my
there.
god, there's bugs floating in that." It's like
Oh my
it's
God.
cloves.
It's
They were
like
there.
So
squirting.
funny.
Can't take them anywhere.
Oh my God.
Oh well.
Okie doke. Well, I guess we could wrap it up.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Not too bad. We did 47 minutes.
That's good.
Yeah. All
Yeah.
right. Well, I don't have what we're doing next. Sorry.
We're
I
supposed to
think
be
we
doing
have
those
John
weird
Willems. We are interviewing John Willems.
Beer
Oh, that's right.
run?
We're
Beer
doing that,
run.
aren't we?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And after that, I don't know. So
We may take a
surprise.
break and figure out
Yeah.
a new structure.
Yeah.
Yep.
New
Yep.
structure. Because we have to do a new recording schedule.
Yeah.
So,
Because somebody
Yep.
left.
somebody
Oops.
did.
Where are you at on the screen? Are you above me?
It was.
I don't know.
I think this way. Yeah, probably that one. I'm pointing to where you usually are on the screen.
Well,
so.
I was going to say, you're
Wherever
going to put me
Mallory
there.
is at. She left.
It was me. But I'm still doing the podcast.
Yes.
So,
Yes, which
Yeah.
is good.
yes.
So we don't have to kill her.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, I would have allowed it. It's fine. It's fine. But yeah. All right. Well, we hope you enjoyed today's episode. It's time for us to go. But before we sign off, only the best libraries have librarians who don't shush you.
But we do drink whiskey.
Yep.